Hey everybody, welcome to Something to Bark About, the podcast where we're going to talk about dogs, dog training, and whatever else strikes my fancy. My name is Chad Mackin, and I will be your host and your guide on this journey into the world of dogs. Hey everybody, welcome. This week I have my friend Brent from Melbourne, Australia. He's a great guy, really cool dude. And I want to apologize, there are some sound quality issues, like it's just the link between his computer and mine just wasn't that good. I've done my best to clean it up. It's not too terrible, but I do apologize. I hope you enjoy this. We had a lot of fun, and that's it. Enjoy the show. All right. I am here with Brent Dry, trainer living in Australia, but originally from New Zealand. This guy's a good friend of mine. I spent a week or so living in his house when I was touring Australia. Him and his wife, Kat, were wonderful hosts, and you may not know this, but Brent's also a pretty amazing cook. So anyway, Brent, how are you doing, man?
Hey, Chad. It's good to be on here, mate. Really good to see you. And, yeah, it's been a little while since we've chatted, so it's good, but it was also really cool to have you and Jay when you were both over come and stay. And like we say, mate, you guys are welcome back anytime, man. It was a blast to have you guys over and just hanging out, sitting down, making you play guitar for me while I cooked a bit of food. It was awesome.
We don't talk about my guitar playing very much.
No, well, it's really funny because I remember you sent me a little riff that you put together on your bass guitar, I think, when you got home. And I said to you, I'm going to put, I really liked it. I'll say it was simple, but I'm sure it wasn't simple, but it was a really nice sound. And I said to you, I'm going to use that as my alarm. And I did, man. I still use it. It's my alarm ringtone. So every time I wake up in the morning, there's a little bit of Chad's Blues guitar coming out for me. So it's good, man. I really enjoy it.
Well, that's awesome. Like, I'm glad you enjoy it. I noodle around with that once in a while. I don't consider myself a very good player, but I do my best. You know, I try to noodle around with that once in a while. But anyway,
it's a nice distraction and nice to wind down after a day of training dogs and that sort of thing. You know, and
yes.
Switch off and focus, wholeheartedly on something, which is important.
Yeah, it's very peaceful, very peace bringing to do that. So it is sure. Nice. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so as you said, I grew up in New Zealand, so my first probably foray into work was in a kitchen. So I was an apprentice chef and ended up cooking professionally for around about 17 or 18 years or something. And then I moved to Australia when I was 22, 23. I just bought a one-way ticket and jumped on a plane and flew over. So it was only a 3-hour flight, so it's not too bad. And then I worked around a few different islands, which are really beautiful, and you're working remote in some of them. Then cooking, I went up to a place called Papua New Guinea, so that was a bit of a fun time. And then came back to Australia and hung around in a place called Noosa, which is a beautiful beachside suburb up in Queensland. And then made a move to Melbourne, which is the bottom of Australia. So, well, apart from Tasmania, so bottom of the mainland. So now living in Melbourne, and I wanted to get out of the kitchen. So I did maybe 12 months of doing like a financial planning thing where I'd go to people's homes and help them with finances. And I just felt like I was lying to people the whole time. I had no belief in the product, so I felt very, very fake and phony. So I didn't enjoy that. And then I'd always been training dogs, and I'd had dogs and that sort of thing. And a dog trainer's course came across, and which was the National Dog Trainers Federation, which I know Cookie has spoken about on your podcast. So I signed up for that, and I did that. I think that was 2008 that I did that course or started that course. Then Cook was one of the instructors on it, so I met Cookie very, very early on in my dog training career. And luckily enough, I also met this gorgeous lady called Kat, who was on the course. We were kind of both out of relationships and not looking for anything, but we really hit it off. And doing the NDTF course, I obviously got a good feel for dog training, but also fell in love with this beautiful lady. And here we are 12 years or whatever it is on. And, life has kind of been amazing since doing the National Dog Trainers Federation course, I'd say, mate. So that was kind of a really brief overview. I started training, I think, professionally in 2008 when we did the course. there was a very big dog training school. So one of the things that we do a lot of is group classes. So when we first started to do the course, both Kat and I didn't know what we wanted from the course. Kat was doing grooming at the time, and she was also getting asked a lot of training questions. I wanted to get out of the crappy finance job that I was doing, so anything for me was going to be better. And what happened really was we hit it off, and we kind of moved in really quickly together. And as we started to wonder what we were going to do at the end of the course, a big dog training club, which was Australian Dog Training, closed their doors. So they had a lot of members, they were taking a lot of members, and they just wound their business up one day. And we found a market for what we wanted to do. Our business idea was a little bit different to Australian Dog Training. They had like a one-off fee that you would pay. So for instance, rough figures, you'd pay $400, and then that $400 gave you level 4 access. So, you do your basics, and then level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and perhaps level 4 was, nice obedience, all done on lead, nothing off lead. Or you could go to level 7, which was your advanced level, and that was, $700. And you could train at any location, and you could train, as long as you wanted to get your dog to that level. So when they kind of closed their doors, there were people who had paid money but no longer had access to those sort of training or to that training school. So when we decided that we were going to do some group obedience, we thought, let's just do it pay as you go. I think it was $10 per lesson at that time, and I think our first lesson that we had, we had 7 dogs rock up. So it was on a Sunday morning 11 years ago or something, mate. So that's kind of what I've been doing and what we've been doing as a business. And the business is called the Canine Company, and since then it's been really doing well, and we've continued to learn, which I think is really important.
Yeah, that is really important. And I have to say that the Canine Company hoodie that you gave me is one of my favorite hoodies. It's one of the warmest ones I have, and it gets a lot of use up here. I'm not going to lie. So
that's good. That's good to hear, mate.
I appreciate that. Maybe
it's good. We love them. We sell them to our clients, and they wear them with pride. And if we can give them away to someone like you, and you wear it with pride too, I think that's a really nice thing. But they're bloody comfy, mate, and they do fit nicely too. So yeah, they're a good thing for sure.
Yeah, they're really nice. So you talked about there's a lot I want to get into with you, because I know that you're really excited about your group class program, and I definitely want to get into that. But you just talked on something that's really, really passionate to me, and that is that constant need to keep learning, to keep improving, and keep getting better. Tell me a little bit about your journey in that regard.
Yeah, sure. So once we finished the National Dog Trainers Federation course, we were actually a little bit lost on what we could do. So there was a couple of dog sport clubs around at the time in Victoria. So unfortunately, in Victoria, the bite work of protection sports is illegal to do, so you're not allowed to do it. So that was quite frustrating, but we could still go along to these clubs and watch them do nice precision obedience and those sorts of things. So we would do that. But we really I started to listen to a lot of the Lehrberg stuff. So with Ed Frawley, any DVD that came out from Michael Alice we would get, or from, at that time it was mainly Mike and Forrest Mickey as well. So we kind of got on to that sort of stuff quite early. So our thought process was anything that we can learn that would then transfer to a group class has got to be better. So we weren't really there for the old yank and crank style stuff. We kind of came on towards the tail end of that, which was really good. And then looking at Michael Alice's stuff where we're using, reward markers and those sorts of things, termination cues was great. But we just went everywhere we could, mate. Like if there was a seminar on, we would go. If there were people that we could talk about dogs too, we would do that. There are a whole bunch of people in our early days that really took the time and took us under their wings, and they would show us things which we really appreciated. So even being relatively new at the time to the dog industry, we just put ourselves out there and became known as people that would, shut our mouths and learn and ask questions, and really appreciated people spending the time to do those sorts of things and show us things. So for us, it was a massive part of our journey. I remember having a conversation with Cookie once upon a time. He was one of our first mentors, and he taught us a lot. And it was around about the time he left Melbourne and went up to Sydney. And we were doing quite well in our group classes at that stage. And we called Glenn and said, mate, what do we do? Like, what's next? How do we get the next thing or more learning? What do we do? And he kind of turned around and he said, it's really tough at the top, isn't it? And we didn't consider ourselves at the top. It was more a lack of opportunity to learn from other people. So at that stage, we really started to travel a little bit, or travel whenever we could. If there was a seminar on, we would definitely go interstate. So, it was really a bunch of who can we learn from, who's happy to have us come along. If we can just sit there and, sit on the bull bar of our car and watch dogs doing obedience and doing anything like that, then we were there. So rain, hail, or shine, and we kind of continue with that learning now.
That's cool. So I think we want to get into this group class thing, though, right? I think that's really, because when I talked to you, I first approached you a couple of months ago, said, hey, you want to come on the show? You go, I've got a topic I want to talk about. And I'm like, great, what is it? You go, group classes. And I'm like, I do workshops on group classes, don't you? And you're like, no, I didn't know that. So it's I've been kind of looking forward to this, and it's been crazy over here, but I've been looking forward to this. So I'm glad I finally got you here to talk about it. And you are really passionate about your group classes. You've mentioned them like several times already. So what's the deal? Tell me what your deal is with group classes.
Sure. So I'll tell you how we structure our group classes, I suppose, and the way that we do things, and we'll go from there. So everybody who comes so we train outside. So we're lucky enough in Melbourne that it doesn't, we don't get snowed in and the weather's not too bad. So we don't really cancel our outside classes. In winter it's cold, and then in summer it's hot, but, it's all doable, and the dogs are really good in those conditions. So we train outside. Everybody who comes down goes to what we call our first-timers class. It doesn't matter if you've got an 8-week-old puppy or if you've got a 6-year-old rescue dog. Generally, it's the people that we're teaching, so the age of the dog for us doesn't matter so much. We start with the absolute basics of, how to hold a lead. This is what a food lure is. We start with loose leash walking, which is important. We teach a release word, and we go through teaching a sit. So that's a first-timers class, which runs for, for instance, that might go for 20 minutes. And then we put those people into our beginners class. So once they go into that class, we then go through loose leash walking again, our release word again, and then we teach things like we teach a guided sit, we teach a lured drop, and then we teach a recall, we teach a stand, which is kind of a very, very simple stand to do, but more the dog following a position. And then everything from there gets layered up a ladder. So in our first-timers or our beginners classes, those are the absolute basics. And then in our advanced classes, we do everything from off-leash recalls, advanced healing techniques, sits and stays with high-level distractions. I could be flying a drone, or people are playing with their dogs, playing with a tug or throwing a ball. And there's a whole bunch of dogs that have to sort of do a sit or do a drop or whatever it is that the positions are in. So that's kind of how we do it. We have a person who runs the class. So, for instance, that might be me running the class. And then we'll have what we call a second or a floater. So that person will float around the group and do one-on-one stuff. So, for instance, you bring your dog down and you might be struggling a little bit with getting the dog into a drop. Then that floater can sort of help you out and say, hey, maybe just turn your hand this way or whatever it is. So people get somebody running the class and directing traffic, and then they also get floaters who come around, and you get that one-on-one time, which is it's important, especially if you're struggling with a position or you're struggling with getting the dog to do something that others might be able to do. So by doing that, we find that people can advance really quickly. but they're not isolated from the group if they are struggling with something, or they're not left behind, We've seen some group classes where, dogs have to do A, B, C, and D, and they've got to do it very, very, very fluently before they can go to the next level. For us, it's not a big thing as long as you know how to teach the dog. Like if I say drop your dog, if you are luring your dog down to that drop position, but you know how to do it, then we've got no issue with people going up through the levels. We don't want to hold you back and then you're really bored because your dog doesn't do a stand, for instance. So that's kind of how we structure it, Chad.
Oh, that sounds really good, and you hit on something really well. And I use this in all my group classes. And my first class is an introduction class. My first meeting, like they come in, they have no dogs, and I kind of give them an overview of the course. I give them some theory about training, and the rules for the course and things like that. But one of the things I tell them, and I reiterate this throughout almost every week it gets said, is that you're going to save yourself a lot of frustration when you understand this simple fact. The dog does not learn in class. You learn in class, the dog learns at home. And once people wrap their mind around that, that's when group classes can become effective, in my opinion. Because, and this is the thing too, like you probably notice, I don't know if it's the same in Australia as it is here in the States, but group classes are kind of a tough sell here. A lot of trainers disrespect them. As a matter of fact, you mentioned Michael Ellis. The first time I met him was at an ISB conference, and we ended up having a very vigorous discussion about the value of group classes. And he was basically saying he didn't think group classes were ever really a good idea. Like, he understood why people do them, but he was basically saying they're the worst place to teach. They're the worst place for a dog to learn. And we had this long kind of debate over this. And it was kind of funny because I'm talking to him and he's talking to me, and we're totally, like, Tyler Muto was there. It was me, Tyler, and Michael Ellis. And like, we're just like, I had tunnel vision. I only saw those two. And when we finally finished it, I turned around and look, there's all these people with cell phones recording this conversation. So somewhere out there, there's a dozen or so videos of Michael Ellis and I arguing, and so far none of them have made it on the internet that I'm aware of, and which is cool because it wasn't intended to be that thing, but it's probably floating around out there somewhere. But there's a real strong pushback here in the States with regards to group classes, and part of the problem is that there are a lot of ineffective group classes. There's a lot of group classes where the theory is, I'm not going to say who this was, but I saw a workshop or presentation at a conference one time, and the presenter was running a large national group class program, right? And he said in the presentation, it is more important that the clients feel like they learned something than they actually learned something. That was his position.
Huh.
And I was like, whoa. I ended up walking out of the class because there were a couple other things he said that I was like, I can't support this, right? This is not how I think. But their whole model, most group class models here is to get your money and make you feel good enough that you'll go and pay for the next level, and make you feel good enough that you go and pay. But they don't want you to ever have a trained dog, because that's when you stop coming to classes, right? So there is a lot of trainers see group classes as hokey and ineffective and whatever, and a lot of people don't want. When I try and sell a group class, people say the same thing all the time. Well, I've done that before; it didn't work. And my response is always, "Well, you didn't come to my group class." So do you find that same thing there in Australia? Do you have the same issue?
I know that there are definitely trainers over here that think the same way. I know Glenn and Pat on the Canine Paradigm, they did a pod in regards to group classes, and I'm sort of listening to some of it and going, yeah, I agree with that. And then there are other parts where I'm kind of talking on the phone and nobody's listening to me and they're not hearing what I'm saying for some strange reason. But I actually find group classes are really, really good in a lot of ways. One of the good things about the way that we structure our group class, I think, is by having that floater, who, if you have a person who's not quite getting it, they can spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes with that person, which then helps them understand what we're trying to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's everything from if I'm doing a one-on-one with somebody and then they've got a dog that's reactive towards other dogs, for instance, I can show them the basics and I can teach them leash handling skills and timing with rewards, but I need the opportunity to work these dogs in a safe area with other dogs. Mm-hmm. If I go for a walk around the street, I can't control that environment, whereas in a group class setting, I can definitely control that environment. So if we have somebody like that with a dog that's a little bit wary of other dogs or whatever it might be, we actually get them down to our advanced level. So that way we can work them around well-trained dogs. So that's a good thing for group obedience classes. One of the things that we are really big on, Chad, is not that people perceive that they learned something, but people actually enjoy the class. So I remember, funny that you say, like you had the audience of Michael and yourself and Tyler. I remember it was you and I and Tyler and Kat, and we were standing around. It was in St. Louis at the IACP conference. And
I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah, man.
Go ahead. Finish the story. I know the story you're going to say.
One of the things that we said is the first thing, or when our clients leave, like, what is it that we want them to have had? What's the experience? And for us, it's fun. Like, did you enjoy what you just did? And if they sit there and say yes, then they're more likely to come back. And it's not that the dog training side of it's not important, but if they have fun and they enjoy what they just did, then they're more likely to come back. If they're more likely to come back, then we're more likely to get a well-trained dog. So I think there's a few components. One of the things that we have is we have a pay-as-you-go system. So we've had clients, in regards to retention, we've got clients that are on their second, third, and fourth dog that train with us. We also have clients that have been training the same dog. We've got one lady, her name's Giggles, and Giggles is an amazing lady. She's really, really cool. And her dog, Bella, is almost 10, and she started with us when Bella was maybe 6 months or still a very, very young dog. She's now got a second dog, but she brings both dogs down to training, and she loves it. And the reason she loves it is it gives her an outing with her dog. She's become really good friends with a whole bunch of the people that do the training. So it's a real community aspect as opposed to, I've got to get up in the morning and go and train my dog. So I think that's one thing that some of the clubs don't put the effort and time into, is creating that community. So I think that's definitely a part of it in regards to people who only see that, where's the benefit of just doing group classes. I think that's definitely one thing where you can actually have a very, very good culture around your club. And from doing something like that, it's not me selling it, because when people are walking around the streets in our local areas and they've got a dog that walks beautifully on lead, and then they sit their dog and they drop the dog, or they go to a cafe and the dog just hangs out at the cafe, people notice those dogs, even though they're not doing advanced dog sport obedience. If people can walk up to a cafe and tell their dog to drop, walk in the cafe and grab a takeaway coffee, people notice that. And even though it's something, for us, it's very, very simple, you'll get asked, hey, what an awesome dog, where do you train? And they'll say, oh, we train at the Canine Company. They're like, oh, that's amazing. It's just a drop, But those sorts of things, our clients often sell our business more than what we do, because they have beautifully trained dogs. So we've kind of find a little bit the opposite, mate. We still do a lot of private consults and those sorts of things. But for us, our private consults, we want them to come down to our group classes, because now you can train your dog in an area with real-life distractions. When real-life things happen, you're not training in a vacuum. And to me, that's the proof in the pudding.
No, there are a lot of advantages to group classes, and there are disadvantages too. Like, I think it's a very, there's a lot. I mean, all training systems or training formats have their advantages and disadvantages. And I think group class has a very powerful advantage, like you're saying, because there's the community, because there's the peer pressure. If you're the dog, if you are the only one who didn't do your homework, you're going to feel it when you walk into that class and everyone else is working. And that thing about fun that you said, I want to go back to that though, because that's really super important. And it got me in a bit of trouble. Nothing dirty. but
Did someone spank you for this, Chad?
yeah, no. But like, so when I was in Texas, all of my programs, all my training programs had lifetime memberships. Like, so if you bought a package of private lessons, it was unlimited lessons for the life of the dog. And nobody used, for the most part, nobody used more than 6 or 10 lessons, right? The average was about 6, I think. Then some people went to 10. A few people might have gone up to 13, but there was like the handful of people who came every week, but they didn't. It turned out most of those people weren't really working their dog anymore. They were just kind of hanging out, and maybe they just got used. Whatever, they enjoyed hanging out. 1 or 2 of those not going to break the bank. That's the cost of making an offer like that. I understood that when I came into it. Never begrudged them that time. They paid for it. They get to use it. If they want to come and walk their dog around and heel and run through their behavior drills and talk to me about the latest movie or whatever, hey, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
No problem, right?
Yeah.
And so when I got up to Illinois, the place I used to work at, we eventually instituted the same program. But somewhere between those 2 programs, I changed my training a great deal. And I became a lot more into the motivational aspect of it. I started pushing for more precision, and I started pushing for more, just more drive in the dogs. Like, I wasn't happy to see a flat dog. And what happened is people started coming to, they take these unlimited private lesson packages. They come for months, every week, and it never became impossible to keep up with, because we had strategies. We could start pushing people on every other week, formats. But people just kept booking because they were having fun, right? And when you're training kind of the old, more compulsion, methods, people don't want to do that to their dogs, so they stop coming as soon as they can reasonably get away with it. But when they're having fun, they keep coming back, and they will pay that weekly or monthly fee, whatever you guys are doing. They will pay that fee for that privilege and that opportunity. And that's a huge thing. When we start talking about, we want people's dogs to be trained, we want to raise the level of ownership, of dog ownership, and let people have realistic expectations what their dogs are capable of. Making sure they have fun is such a huge part of that.
Yeah, it really is. And I think for us, so we have a couple of options in regards to coming to training. So we do a pay-as-you-go system, but you can also actually sign up for 2 things: 12 months, or for the lifetime of the dog, right? So the people who sign up for 12 months, we kind of, I suppose you could sit there and say we break even. The people who sign up for the lifetime of the dog, we kind of make no money from them. We have 3 group classes, so Monday night, Saturday morning, Sunday morning. So if they come 2 or 3 times a week, then financially we'd be 100% better off charging them per class, right? But what we really found is that all of these guys who really dedicate themselves to their dog, they become the advertisement for our business. So even though we make, when these guys the dogs are 5, 6 years old, and we haven't made money from them forever, they're the people that are telling the, average person in the street, hey, you should come down to the training class. It's a lot of fun. These are the things that we do with our dogs. So their dogs become the best ambassadors that we could hope for. The proof's in the pudding with the dog, isn't it, Chad? So if they're sitting there and saying, come down to this group class, these are the things that I do, while their dog's in a drop outside of a cafe, or they're at a local bar having a beer and the dog's just sitting under the table and doesn't care about other dogs or other people walking past it, then it's a really good advertisement for our business. So whilst we don't, at this stage, I suppose, make money from those people, like you definitely do initially, which is great, but they advertise our business just by having the dogs that they have. But these are the people that also create this beautiful culture around what we do. So it's, in some ways, it's a two-edged sword, but for us, the more of these lifetime members that we have, the better it is for our business. So they all end up in our advanced class because they do those regular training sessions and they come down more. And when we put seminars on, we run seminars or workshops, they come to those. But when you guys came out and did your workshops and seminars down in Melbourne, our clients come to those workshops. When Tyler came out and did a workshop, our clients, like our advanced clients, come to those workshops because they're invested in their dogs, they're invested in us. So it pays off really across the board in the dog world for us, so which is a really nice thing. And then these guys go off and, like, we're not a competition club, but they go off and they'll compete in ANKC obedience, or they'll go off and do rallyo competitions. And strangely enough, these guys are walking away with the highest scores and the gold medals, because it's the sort of stuff that we do in our classes all the time. So,
this I mean, I'm really liking what I hear, and it sounds really good. And I think it's so awesome that there's other people. Group classes kind of starting to come back. I've seen a couple people offering workshops now in group classes, and a couple people on like the ISB membership page are posting about their group class. So I think it's starting to come back a little bit, and I think it's good for dogs. It's good for dog trainers. It's good for dog owners. For dog owners, it's going to be the lowest barrier to entry, right?
Yes.
And often it's the cost that keeps people from getting their dogs trained. And dog trainers can be a little, I don't know, high and mighty about this. They'll go, well, if they can't afford me, they shouldn't have a dog because the vet's going to cost them more than I do.
Yeah.
But the truth is, people don't budget for training when they buy a dog or they adopt a dog. They understand they're going to pay vet bills. They don't think about training because most people who own dogs grew up in a world where most pet dogs in the world don't ever see a professional trainer. If most of the pet dogs saw a professional trainer, we wouldn't have time to argue with each other on the internet. We'd all be too busy working because there's way more dogs. Like you look at the average size neighborhood, at least here in the States. Look at the average size neighborhood, and you say how many dogs are in this neighborhood, and how many trainers would it take to reasonably service these people? And it's more trainers than any locality I know of. Any small area has. So, I could not – there's just a neighborhood that's right across the street from my old work. I could not have handled every dog in that neighborhood by myself, right?
No.
So most pet dogs never see a trainer. And so they don't budget for it. So when we say things like, well, they shouldn't have got a dog if they can't afford a trainer, most people don't think about that when they get a dog. And having group classes, it provides a very low barrier to entry in terms of cost comparative to other programs. And it also creates, in my mind, it creates a lot of pressure for the owner to succeed because they're coming in every week and there's not just the trainer that's seeing their work, it's other people. But they also get to share the struggle because like if someone comes into to a private lesson, they've been working on something and they're not quite getting it. I had someone come in this last week and they're like, I feel like the world's worst student because my dog's not getting it. And I'm like, no, that makes me the world's worst teacher, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you walk into a group class and you see you're not the only one struggling, you see other people are having the same issues, then you go, oh, this is hard. And and now I don't feel like I'm the only one who's not getting it. And I think those things really matter. I think they matter a lot. But from a training point of view, it really is, if you can fill up a class with, say, 10, 15 people, or even 6 if you got a small area, if you can fill up a class, you will make more money per hour doing that group class than you will doing anything else you do. Trainers like to push for board and train because they get that big fee up front. But if you break it down by what you make by hours, group class has them all beat by a long shot.
Yeah.
So
sorry, mate. We used to do some board and trains, and we used to take dogs here at our house, and some of the dogs were great. Like at one stage, I remember a few years ago, we had, I think we had 8 Rottweilers and 2 Labradors over Christmas. So that was a whole lot of fun, right? But what we found was when we did board and trains, even though we would sit there and say, we had one specific dog. We had a little Dalmatian puppy who came to us at 14 weeks. Elderly children bought the Dalmatian for their elderly parents. So we got this beautiful little dog called Domino, and we did 3 weeks with this dog. And he was the sweetest boy. He was doing, like, he was a young puppy, but he was doing off-lead recalls from distractions and really, really cool little stuff at the end of the 3 weeks. And then at the end of the 3 weeks, we did this handover, which took about an hour and a half. We said, look, we really advise you to continue with just coming down to group classes. That way the dog continues to learn. We can continue to shape your handling with the dog and all these sorts of things. And they're like, yeah, perfect. The elderly couple were there with the elderly, when I say elderly couple, we're talking maybe late 60s, and then the adult children were 40, right? So old enough and crazy enough. But we didn't see them for 12 months. And then they came back 12 months later, and there was this huge big Dalmatian who's just rocked up to group class, and they're like, oh, we're here to do training. This is Domino. Do you remember? And, mate, without a word of a lie, I had tears, like, streaming down my face because of not what they'd done to this dog. It was what they didn't do with this dog. The dog was now living in the backyard because the elderly people couldn't handle the dog. The children weren't doing anything with it. Mate, it was terrible, and it literally broke my heart. And that was the last board and train I ever did. I just couldn't handle the fact that these people had a beautiful dog, and then we did all this work with it, gave the dog back. It was very, very clear in the handover, like, these are the things, keep coming to classes, and they said that they would. But 12 months later, the dog's just out of control, and they want us to fix it. It's like, we gave you this perfect canvas that you could continue to paint on, and you did nothing. So that was the last board and train we did, and so now it's more group class stuff that we focus on, mate. So, yeah, that was a tough one.
I'll tell you, I one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got in this industry was, I call it Goldberg's Law, because I got it from Mark Goldberg, and it's very, very solid. And it says, never become more invested in the dog's success than the owner is. And the story you just told me was you not following Goldberg's Law. And I think that's a survival skill that we need in this industry, because we want them all to succeed. We want them all to do well. And when you put your heart and soul into some work, and then the people who paid you to put your heart and soul into that work basically treat it like it's unimportant, it's crushing. It's crushing. And so if you want my heart and soul, I got to see your heart and soul. If I see yours, if I see yours, I'm going to be right there with you. But if you seem half-hearted about it, I'm going to do my best work. Don't get me wrong, but that's not the dog I'm going to go home and think about. That's not the dog I'm going to be like, how can like you have me for that hour you paid for, and that's what you're going to get. But if I see your heart and soul, you're going to get a lot more than that. You're going to get, I'll be thinking about your dog the whole week. Trying, if I see you struggling, if I see you trying and not getting it, it's going to break my heart, like you. But if I see you not trying and not getting, I'll be like, okay, well, just go home and practice that. It's you have to do that as a defensive reaction, or as a defensive behavior, because this it will eat you up if you don't. It will crush you.
Yeah, it's something that we're very, very conscious of now, especially Chad. We actually take students. So at our group classes, at our group obedience classes, we take students from the National Dog Trainers Federation. There's a couple of others. So we take students who are studying to become veterinarians and that sort of thing. So they come down and they work with us, or we show them what we're doing in our group classes. So in regards to, for instance, the National Dog Trainers Federation, it could be a very, very good place where we can get trainers for our business, right? But we sit there and we say the same thing, like, we don't get paid to take them at all, so there's no reimbursement from the NDTF to us for taking them. Most of the students that we get, well, they're like, the students are awesome, and they're volunteering their time. They pay the NDTF, but they're volunteering their time to come down and train with us and watch what we do and learn from us. But we see the students that put their time in. We see the ones that rock up all the time. So we can gauge it as much as we can and sit there and say, hey, look, this person will be really good for our business. Are you interested in running group classes and those sorts of things? So we learned that, relatively early on, I suppose, in our business. not to become too invested, But when that person is there and they're there week in, week out, we can do debriefs with students that last for a couple of hours, and our trainers, as you've noticed and as you saw when you came out, our trainers are part of our family. We deeply care about them. We love them very, very deeply, as do a lot of our clients. I mean, our clients are part of our family as well. So, they all share in the successes that we have as a business, and they share in the successes and failures that we have as people as well. So it is a good law that Goldberg's law. We cottoned onto it a little bit too late, I suppose, with Domino, but we also believe that they were invested in the dog the same way that we were too. So it's a very interesting thing.
So I have a question for you. This is maybe just a discussion, maybe not a question, maybe it's the wrong word, but we hear a lot of trainers talk about holding clients accountable. And that's always been an issue that I've always kind of not liked that term. And I also don't like hearing people say hold the dogs accountable. And not that I disagree with those ideas. Sometimes the word you choose will reveal a little bit more about your mindset than maybe you intend to, or maybe I'm reading it more into it than I need to. But accountability always seems to be about my authority. Holding somebody accountable seems to be about my authority. And I don't feel the need to hold my clients accountable, because if I don't motivate them, I've messed up. My job, I hold myself accountable, to a certain degree. Now, again, Goldberg's law, notwithstanding, if I have one person in class who's not trying hard, then that's probably a person that's just not into it, or maybe they got some struggles in their lives or whatever. If I have 6 people in my class or 4 people in my class that aren't into it, then it's probably my fault. I'm probably not motivating them. And in private lessons, again, I feel like it's my job to kind of figure out why they're not interested. What's going on? What can we do to make this more interesting? Because if you have a client who's flat, who's just going through the motions, there's a real good chance that they're uncomfortable with something you're asking them. And maybe they're uncomfortable because they don't understand, or maybe they're uncomfortable because it seems wrong to them, but they're too polite, for lack of better words, to say something. They're just trying to get along, and you need to kind of ferret that out, I think. Do you find the same thing? Do you find that you try to work on holding yourself accountable for your students more than holding them accountable, and focus on motivation? Are we on the same page on that?
I think it's a really good question, and I think your timing on this question, Chad, it's very interesting, right? So I'll segue a little bit. So as you know, I do a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now as well, and with this coronavirus drama that's going around, there are a lot of jiu-jitsu clubs that are kind of sitting there and suspending memberships, or talking about suspending memberships. And there was a post that I saw on Facebook yesterday from a gentleman who's a very, very well-known trainer in Australia, in Melbourne, and he put up that now as a student, or so he said as an owner of a business, if you have students that now in this time where we need to be supported as a club, if you have students that need or that want to suspend their membership because you've closed down for 2 weeks, maybe they're not the sort of student that you want. And some of the phrasing that he used I thought was not too good, but I kind of liked the idea of it. The reason I like the idea of it is, if we had people that come down to training and then they have a dog that needs help, but they can't afford the training, just come to training. Let's get you the help that you need. So in times of struggle, I think we need to make sure that we're there for people and there for the dogs. So I think that's an important thing to be aware of. But I also think that in saying that, we could have in one group class, so we have multiple classes running at a time. So on a Sunday morning, for instance, we might have 60-odd dogs down on the field at one time. We sit there and say all the time, train at your level, train at your dog's level. Don't look at the person beside you, because maybe their dog picks things up faster, or maybe they've been coming longer or whatever. So part of it is don't judge your dog from all the other dogs, but part of it then is also up to us to not make sure that they're accountable, but that they see that there's progression and that they see where the path is actually taking them. So if they don't understand how to get to the next level, or if they don't understand what's actually achievable with their dog, I think that's sometimes where we let a client down. So when we first started, I used to be, I would be relatively comfortable and happy to take the lead of a dog from a client and show them that their dog can do it. And I think for me, part of that was not a big ego, it was having an ego and sort of saying to them, hey, look, your dog will do it for me. Why can't they do it for you? And then I stopped doing that because I didn't think that number one, it wasn't good for me, right? Because it was a little bit too much of an ego for me. But I also think sometimes if you did it incorrectly, it didn't make the client feel better about themselves. It made them feel worse, and it didn't show the client that the dog could do it. It showed the client that the client couldn't do it. So now if I take the leash of a dog and I start to demo something, I make sure that we get it with the dog and then we get it with the client. And I actually say this isn't about the dog not doing it for you, and this isn't about me proving the dog can do it for me. It's about showing you the dog can actually do the behavior. And once I understand that distinction, I think that helps them move forward a lot better. So part of the motivation is seeing success in the dog. And it's not success that my dog is better than the other dog on the other side of the field. It's my dog is better than what it was last week. So I think that's a good point to make.
It's an interesting point because I do that a lot. And I know what you're talking about because there was a time where it was a big ego boost for me. You know, like I think for the first 5 years in this industry at least, and actually probably first 10 years for most of us, there's a fair bit of imposter syndrome going on where we're just waiting for somebody to figure out, we just figured out how to, we just learned how to do this 2 years ago, or to this day, there's still times I'm surprised at how well this stuff works. Like I've done it 100 times. And I'm like, wow, that really works fast. I still get excited about that. And that maybe comes from a little bit of imposter syndrome too there. And I think this is an industry because most of us get a large portion of our education on the streets, so to speak. We kind of don't feel like if you come up with a new way to teach sit or to proof sit or whatever, in your head you're going, this is just something I made up. Who am I? Right? Who am I to just make this up? And I was talking with a guy who was big in IGP now, I guess it's called. IPA is a beer.
I'm the guy who's big on the IPAs, mate.
Yeah. But there's a decoy for IPO, and he said, like I was talking about Pat and PSA, right? And his response was, "Oh, some guy just made that crap up in their basement." Well, yeah, at some point in time, some guys just made up IPO, and at some point in time, people just made up AKC obedience. Like it's all so. Go back far enough, somebody just made it up. It's not like dog training was handed down to us on some holy book from on high, and we're all partakers of it. Like everything is something somebody made up. But I think we feel like when we make it up, that it gives it less validity, and so and a lot of us make up so much of what we do on a day-to-day basis, right? So yeah, I think for a lot of times it is a big ego boost to show, look how good I am, and we like it. At some point in time, we like that ooh and ah when people go, oh my God, you make it look so easy. You should have your own TV show. All those things, they make us feel warm and great, and I think that is incredibly attractive. But I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one, right? I think, especially in class, if I have somebody that's struggling with their dog, I will ask everybody to stop what they're doing, take a seat, and watch. And I will talk through I'll take the leash and I will talk through the process. And I will explain why I'm doing what I'm doing, what I'm doing is already been taught. Remember this exercise that we taught last week? We're going to use that here this way. Remember this drill we did to practice this? We're going to do this. What do you think will happen if I mark now versus now? Right? And I use it as this teaching opportunity and get them thinking about, because my goal, and I stole this line from Robin McFarlane a couple years ago, and it's not that the idea was new, but she articulated it beautifully. She says, my goal is that my clients never need me anymore. right? I want to be unnecessary. And that's not the same thing as them not coming back. But like if you and Kat disappeared, got abducted by aliens or whatever, you wouldn't want your clients to be like, I can't train my dog. You want to know that they were able to keep going on without you just as strongly. And that's, if my goal was to make sure they don't need me, I want them to see the troubleshooting process. I want them to see how you evaluate what just happened. You think about what could be causing that to go offline, and you adjust it with the principles that you already know. And so I think there's a lot of value in that if you have the time in your class to do it. I structure my class where I've got plenty of time for that sort of thing.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
But I think that's a very valuable thing. But you brought up the other point. Then you got to do the next step and give that leash back to them and get them to do it correctly before you end that segment with them. So they walk away feeling like, I can do this too. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we definitely still grab dogs, and we definitely still do demos with dogs and those sorts of things. So it's not like we're hands off. I will definitely still grab a dog and I'll do a demo. But I used to grab the most difficult dog, and to prove that I could do it and those sorts of things. So I've gone away from doing those sorts of things. I think it's very important that we still, show the technique to the class. We have to do that. We've got to demonstrate that this technique works. But if we get a dog that doesn't quite do the behavior, then we sit there and go, all right, guys, we're going to mark this behavior, and we're going to go through some shaping, or we're going to go through successive approximation, or whatever it is that we need to go through with this dog to get the behavior that we're after from this dog. But it's not a race. If the dog doesn't complete the drop today, I don't care. Like, we can work on that throughout the week, and then they work on that specific technique or skill set through the week. They come back the following weekend or whatever it is, and they're like, hey, Brent, check this out. The dog's doing a drop. I'm like, yay. Through me spending 2 minutes and just talking about, don't rush it, take your time, let the dog figure it out. It gives them more satisfaction than me just crunching the dog to the position, So that's kind of more what I mean. But I agree with what you say, especially in regards to what Robin said. So I've got an amazing client, Donna, with her little dog, Ned, who's a little spoodle. And she turned around, and Ned would do some funny little spoodly type things. And she turned around to me one day and she said, I had a problem. I was just about to message you. And she said, no, I won't do that. And she said, I thought, what would Brent do? And as soon as she said, I went, you're a dog trainer. Like, now you're training dogs, Donna. It's not me telling you. This is you thinking like a dog trainer. And those sorts of stories are the ones that that make me tear up and get me all teary and with joy. But the other ones that we do this for, I think, Chad, that there's moments where you see the person be successful, which then creates the success in the dog. And by doing something very, very simple, like stopping and thinking, hey, what would Brent do in this situation? Or I've got this whole skill set, I've got this toolbox, even though you're just a dog owner, right? You have the same toolbox that we've taught, and you can train your dog to do anything you want. So when they start to think like that and the client thinks that way, then they can do anything they want with the dog, and they can train the dog to do anything, even without understanding the science behind it,
So there's a lot of stuff that, and I may have, I'm not in a rush to get anywhere, but I may have to have you on again because I'm feeling some rabbit holes starting to open up. But and there's some questions that I really want to ask you. But like you just mentioned something about confidence, and I think this is really important. I was actually starting to write something while I was, the past hour before we were scheduled to, get on this call. And it was because I had a friend of mine who was messaging me from with questions about dogs and dog training, and she's struggling with her dog, and I've been trying to help her remotely as much as I can because she doesn't live near me. But she made this comment about visualizing. Maybe I should just, because we talk about the law of attraction a little bit, because maybe I should just visualize my dog walking nicely next to me. And I'm like, what? Listen. If you can't see it, you can't be it, right? And that's a phrase that I don't know if that they use here a lot in, like, when they talk about how we need to have women CEOs or, whatever, is that if a young girl is growing up and she doesn't see women in positions of power, she may not believe that women can be in positions of power, which is a great observation, and I totally support that idea. But I was thinking, this is what I was writing, is for dog trainers, it's even more true for our clients. Because if the client doesn't believe they can succeed, they're not going to. Like, one of my favorite quotes is from Henry Ford that says, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. And so one of the things that I think our job is to, when people come to see us a lot of times, when people call the dog trainer a lot of times, it's not because, God, I wish we had more people who just go, I just got this puppy and I want to start things off right. I wish we got more of those. But what we often get is the people who are at their wits' end. We're the last stop before the shelter or the needle. And they know that. And when they know that, I think they start to emotionally prepare for that unconsciously. And they start to distance themselves from that dog just ever so slightly. And it's not that they don't want us to succeed. They don't want to be disappointed if we don't. And so they start to sort of say, it's probably not going to work anyway. And once they step out the door with the leash in their hand thinking it's probably not going to work, they've shot themselves in the foot. So it's very important for us as trainers, I think, to inspire them to believe that they can. Right. And I think this goes back to what you said about having fun, because if they're having fun, the dog's going to be having fun. The dog's going to be having fun. They're going to make progress. And that's when they're going to start to believe they can do it. So tell me, what are your thoughts on that? Do you find that to be the same case? And what strategies do you use to sort of get a client over that sort of, to really believe, that fear of being disappointed that keeps them from really believing?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So one of the things that I think is important is that we know where our dog is at. So let's just, like, if I talk about, for instance, the National Dog Trainers Federation students that come down, the first time they come down, we do an induction for them, and they sit down. There could be 10 students, say. We sit down, and then I'll ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, what level is your dog's obedience at? Like, that's what we're teaching. We're teaching dog obedience. So some will sit there and they'll say, oh, he's an 8, or, she's a 4. Some people go, she's a -2, however you get that on a scale of 0 to 10. But these are the answers that people come up with. And then maybe 4 weeks later, when they've brought their dog down a few times and they've seen a few things that we're doing in class, they actually sit there and watch our advanced class and they go, oh, my dog's he was an 8, but now he's a 3, because I didn't realize this is possible. I didn't know what off-leash, focused healing with a drop on the move and then a recall past 4 dogs. I didn't know that was a thing, so my dog can't do any of that. But it's important that we know on our scale of what our scale actually encompasses. So part of it is building the confidence in the person that they can improve and the dog can improve. But part of it is actually being aware of what sorts of things you can do with the dog. So I think as we see, one of the things that we have is we'll run multiple group classes at the same time. So they'll see, the people in our beginners class might see what the dogs in level 1 are doing. They're like, oh, look, those guys are starting to do recalls with distractions. When do we do that? Well, it's when your dog will return to you when you say come from a meter away when they're just sniffing the ground. So it's kind of building the dog's confidence, it's building the handler's confidence, and it's just making sure that they understand that there's a process in place to get to where they need to be. But a big part of it, I think, is that they understand that there are different levels. So, like, there's rungs of the ladder that they can climb, but without seeing the next rung of the ladder, what is there to aim for?
I like that. That's a really good idea. So next question. This is something I've been meaning to ask for a while now, and I think it's important because group class is about teaching the owners, right? Like that's the most important thing. So there's this ongoing debate, and you mentioned earlier, we're going to do successive approximation, or we're going to do shaping, or we're going to whatever. So a lot of dog trainers really try to avoid using any kind of technical jargon with their students.
Yep.
I don't. I try to keep it to a reasonable level You know, but where do you stand on that? Like, you obviously use some of it. What's the measure you use to decide what's too much and what's just enough and what's too little? Like, how do you find that sweet spot?
I think if you use technical words, you need to be able to explain it simply, right? So if I sit there and say, so all we're going to do is use successive approximation, so every time the dog gets a little closer to the goal, we're just going to mark and reward the behavior. And they go, oh, okay. So I'll use the words and the phrases, but I won't do that in our first-timers class or in our beginners class, you know. A lot of the clients, if I can give them 2 or 3 pieces of advice, for instance, like let's just talk about loose leash walking, right? This is how we hold the lead. You're going to have the lead in your right hand, and then you're going to reward the dog with the left-hand side, and you're going to walk in a straight line. And then when you turn, you're going to turn to your right-hand side, and then you're going to reward the dog with the palm of your hand facing the dog. Off you go. That's heaps. Like, that's a lot for somebody brand new in a new environment to actually process. So once they start to get the hang of that, now I can add other small things to it. Changes of direction. Maybe I'm going to talk about that. Maybe I'll talk about footwork. Maybe I'll talk about, you know, gathering the lead up a little bit closer when the dog's beside you and then letting it go when they're further away. So if I can give somebody 2 or 3 pieces of simple advice, then as they get better at that, then I can layer in one more piece over and one more piece over. And then those pieces of advice can be done in 2 ways. I can bring them all back in as a group, or I can have them still out doing loose leash walking, and I would, for instance, just sit there and say, hey guys, just stop for a sec, check in with me. Remember, when you're rewarding, the palm of your hand faces the dog. Beautiful work, back into it. So it can be a 3-second piece of advice, or it could be a 30-second, you know, piece of advice. So I think that's important to make those distinctions. The other side of it is making sure that when we are using the type of jargon, technical words or whatever, that it's at a time where people are receptive to that information and that it's actually applicable to what we're doing right now. So if I sit there and say we are going to be luring our dog, when we're doing loose leash walking, we're not luring, we're rewarding behavior. But when we're doing a drop, for instance, then we're going to be luring. If we're using successive approximation because this dog specifically won't go down into a drop, then I sit there and I won't always say successive approximation. But maybe in our more advanced levels, I will say that. Or if they haven't quite got it, then I will say that. So I kind of pick and choose a wee bit on when I use technical words. We'll use, like, you know, hey guys, we're going to use positive reinforcement or whatever it might be. So we'll use a quadrant. We'll talk about those sorts of things. It's more of a, not a throwaway line, Chad, but it's more of a, this is successive approximation, and but this is what it looks like and this is what it means. So don't get hung up on the terminology because, in all honesty, they don't care about it at all.
No, if they understand it, it speeds communication up, which is why we have jargon. And it's interesting. It's interesting that you're using successive approximation as the example in this, because that is the technical piece of jargon that I find people have the easiest time grasping. Like when I tell people about it, I just said this just yesterday. We're going to use some successive approximation, and that's exactly what it sounds like it is. And they go, "Oh, okay, I get it." Right? And so I think it's one of those things that one's very clear. But you know, like I very rarely will go into with my clients about the quadrants. Right? I won't necessarily explain what negative punishment is, but I'll say we're gonna. You know, I use Duke Ferguson's line, which maybe he got from Bart, I don't know, but I'm going to shut the restaurant down, right? Like, we're going to shut the restaurant. Like, when the dog does this, we're shutting the restaurant for a few minutes or whatever. So I won't go, that's negative reinforcement usually, as a general rule, unless there's a question that I need to describe the difference to answer. And that's the other thing that I find is, like, sometimes to answer a specific question, you have to get a little more technical about what's going on. Right, here's why we don't do this, and here's why we do. But that's a good answer. I like that, and it sounds like we handle it in very similar ways. If it's necessary, if I believe that understanding the jargon will speed up their learning or make things better, then I will use it. If I feel like it's going to confuse them or make things harder for them, then I won't. And that's going to vary, again, just like what we do with the dogs is going to vary from dog to dog. The amount of jargon I use with a client or a particular group is going to vary with that group, I think, too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's what works with this group that we're currently teaching. I also think it's what's your personality as a person, you know. So, in regards to our trainers, mate, we've got the best trainers. Like, I love them dearly. That you know, they are really like family. The guys that work for us, and I'd give anything to them, anything I can, and you know, they're truly the best. But the reason that we choose these guys is because they've got great personalities. I can teach somebody how to train a dog, or I can teach somebody how to run a group class, but I can't teach you to be nice. I can't teach you to be friendly. I can't teach you to be open, and you know.
That's true.
So one of the reasons that we have a really successful business is because of our staff, and we literally choose most of our staff, or all of our staff, because they are really open, friendly, caring people.
Right.
I can teach them all the other stuff that I need them to do in regards to the business. So I think that's important. So in regards to how they run a class, it differs to me. Like, the techniques are the same, the skill set's the same. A lot of the obedience skills are the same. Use your personality, like, be you. Don't be a clone of me. If you want to steal some of the phrases that I use, like, go for it, steal them. But at some stage, make the class yours. So if it's part of you as a technical person where you use technical words, then use them. But if it's not, and you kind of don't have that come out of your mouth as something that flows, then don't throw that terminology and jargon in, you know. So I think it kind of also depends on the trainer, mate. If it's part of what you do and what you say, then throw it in there. But if you just want to make some jokes in regards to the dog following the food along, and sometimes the dog gets it right, and then we just reward the next little steps. If that's the way that you phrase it, then phrase it that way.
Yeah, so here's the other side too, going back to the ego. I think a lot of trainers use jargon when they're feeling that imposter syndrome. I think jargon a lot of times is a way to sort of intimidate, or not intimidate, it's the wrong word. I think a lot of times the jargon is there to remind the client or the student who the teacher is, and make the teacher sound like right now, if somebody asks me a question about a dog, any question almost, like if it's just the average dog owner goes, well, what do you think about this? I could probably talk until they had to leave on that subject, whatever it was. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and give me a chance, give me half a chance, and I will, because I mean, I've got a podcast where I just sit in front of a microphone in an empty room and talk to the microphone about dogs. Like, so, I mean, I can talk about dogs. It's not a problem for me. And if I want to prove to a client that I know more than they do, it's easy for me to do. But I'm no longer in the business of proving that. They called me. They know that. Right? And while if they call me and I sound like an idiot when they come in, well, then they're going to know that too. But I think a lot of people, they throw jargon out as a way to sort of fill that gap where so the owners go, wow, I didn't know half of what they're talking about. They must know more than me. And I think that really, if we want to do that, if we want to convince the clients that we know what we're talking about, we shouldn't be using jargon for that. We should be speaking in plain language, explain it to them like they're 5, you know, and then they go, oh, wow. Because that's where the genius is. Or genius, I hate to use that word, but that's where people go, when it makes so much sense. And it's the forehead slapping them, like, why didn't I think of that? Like, why did that never occur to me that way? And I love when I get that look of recognition on somebody's face, because that's when I know they've bought into the idea, and they're going to want to practice it because it makes sense to them, right? Up until that point.
Yeah, I agree. And it's the same with the dog, right? Like, we want to reward for the small steps, and we want to make sure that the dog has engagement with us. if I'm trying to teach a dog to do a focused heel, but they can't just walk nicely on a lead, I'm going to lose the dog. The dog's going to be so distracted. So if I start to use, verbal or I suppose words that the normal person needs to have a dictionary or thesaurus to actually understand, by the time I've moved on, I've said the word and then I've moved on and they're lost. It's kind of gone, and then you see those glazed eyes and they're looking around. And so that type of, I don't want to say verbal bullying, but that intimidation of, hey, I know all these big words, where are you at? And you need to learn them too. It doesn't fly with me. I mean, explain something simply, and now I can understand it, and now maybe I'll become a little bit more invested in what you're talking about, and then I can do some research and I can find more information on these subjects, So I think that the best communicators in the world are people that speak plainly and simply.
Mm-hmm.
That way everybody can play along at home and follow the game. So if you get a little bit lost and then you're kind of trying to process what that word was 12 seconds ago, and then they've moved on, you've lost the process and you're unsure of where you're at now. So I think we need to be very, very careful with what we sort of, with the words that we do say and the words that we do use. So, keeping it simple in regards to our vocabulary in a lot of cases, I think is easy, and everybody can kind of grasp it. And then if you need to explain a technical term or a technical word, make sure that you can explain it and explain it simply. But yeah, I think it's important to not use those verbal bullying techniques that sort of sit there, and if I'm using whatever this terminology is, it's not done from an ego perspective that I know more, and it's done if I need to, it's done from an educational point of view of, this is the technical word for it, but just so you know, it just means, do something step by step.
It becomes a kind of shorthand when everybody knows what you're talking about, right? And that's the value of it, right? So yeah, I think that's really important. So I want to go back at the beginning of the show. You mentioned, and forgive me for being a little bit, forgetful, but it was either in your beginner, I think it was your not your first timers class, but your next one up. You said you taught a guided sit and a lured drop, right? And something else I can't remember. There were three things. But my question is, do you teach those things differently? In other words, I almost always lure a sit and almost always lure a drop, or a down as we call it here. Almost always lure those. But is it deliberate choice to put the guided sit in there because you think guided sits are better, or because you want them to practice guiding versus just luring?
Mate, it's an awesome question, Chad. I'm glad we came back to it. So everything we do, we should be able to explain very, very clearly. So all of the processes that we have in regards to techniques, we have reasons for them. So the first thing in regards to a guided sit that we want to work on is, can your dog have its collar held without freaking out? So that's the first part of it, right? Like, we've had dogs come down to our group classes where we'll hold the dog's collar, just touching the collar, and the dog will freak out. We've had dogs urinate and absolutely freak and try and bite us. So the reason that we're teaching a guided sit is, can the dog just be handled? Can they just relax when we touch their collar? So that's the first part of it. And then the sit is kind of whatever. Like, Blind Freddy can teach a dog to sit in 5 minutes. It's not so much about the sit. It's more about the technique of guiding a dog, or the technique of getting relaxed compliance from the dog, or the dog just being handled and manipulated, because those are the things that happen in everyday life. If your dog goes to a groomer, they'll be manipulated. If they go to a vet, they'll be manipulated. If a tree falls down on your fence and the dog gets out and starts to run down the road, somebody like you or I, or everybody listening to this podcast, will stop their car and encourage the dog to come over. But if you go to grab the dog's collar to see if there's an ID tag on it, and the dog's not used to having its collar touched, and then they turn around and bite you and take off, it's making that dog's life a hell of a lot harder to try to get them home to where they should be. So that's kind of one of the main reasons. There's other ways to teach a sit, as you know, but for us, if we can just teach the dog to be relaxed when somebody holds their collar, the guided sit sort of takes care of itself. But for us, it's more about the physical manipulation of the dog, because I think that's something that's not done. I don't think it's done often enough, and I think people are very, very hands off with their dogs. Whereas I want the dog to be comfortable being handled and manipulated, and if the dog is facing from left to right, but I want you to face from right to left, and I can just pick you up and turn you around, and the dog goes, yeah, I'm just facing the other way now, and they don't care, then that's part of my job as a dog trainer, to be able to teach the dog to deal with those sorts of things.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good answer. Good answer. So I decided a couple of days ago, or maybe a week ago, that I'm going to start asking all my guests the same question at the end of the podcast. So I'm going to ask you, Mike.
I've got a question for you as well before we finish, mate.
Okay, well, ask your question first. You ask your question first, because I want to end with your answer.
Okay, cool. And you can take this. This might be part of the Chad Mackin podcast question that you continue to ask. So you have your Mount Rushmore over there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Who are the 4 people that you'd put on your dog trainer's Mount Rushmore?
Oh, that's a hard one. So I got to think. So Mount Rushmore, these are people hugely influential for the country, not necessarily influential to me. And that's really what I got to pay attention to, because it wouldn't be hard for me to pick the 4 trainers who have been most influential to me. Like, I think that'd be but narrow them down to 4 would be hard. But right. But picking the 4 trainers that I think are most influential is the way I'm interpreting that, is why I'm choosing to answer it. It's gonna upset a lot of people, but I gotta put Bill Keeler on there, and because I really feel like he ushered in the modern. Not the mod. He ushered in the first wave of obedience. He wasn't the first guy doing it, but I feel like when I started 20 years ago, if I said Bill Keeler, everybody knew who I was talking about. I'm almost 30 years ago, but almost everybody knew who Bill Keeler was, more than anybody else. And everybody has an opinion on them, but they knew. Sometimes they got the name wrong. Sometimes they think it's color or but I have to put him on there first. And I think he's given us a lot of stuff. There's a lot of wisdom contained in his books. I don't follow the method anymore, and I have some fairly strong disagreements with some parts of the book. But overall, I think he's a guy that did a whole lot of good for dogs. So he would have to be on there. Of course, Pavlov. Literally, Pavlov founded modern animal training. All modern animal training is based on Pavlov. It's got to put that guy on there. And probably Conrad Lorenz. And I'm not real familiar with his work, but I know I'm very familiar with Roger Abrante's work. And he was one of Lorenz's students. And ethology is a huge part of what we do. So I would have to put him in. So I got 3. So there's one more that I got to put left, right? Left, right? That's obviously got to be you, man. Obviously got to put you up
there. Nobody wants his face on a mountain, mate.
No, let me think. The last one's kind of hard, because this is where it starts to become sort of it starts to become, those are you can't have modern psychology without Freud. You can't have modern dog training without Pavlov and Lorenz. Then for myself, it'd be a lot easier to pick.
It's a tough one.
I kind of am leaning towards Ian Dunbar. And that's going to really upset some of my more balanced listeners. But like one of the things that I talked with, I talk about this a lot. I talked with, I don't know if when Fenzi was on the podcast, I don't know if we talked about this in particular, but I know that in private conversations before or after the podcast, we talked about this. The positive movement, without the positive movement, which was really pushed by Dr. Dunbar, without the positive movement, I don't think we would have ended up with Bart Ballone's, Michael Ellis's, and Ivan Balabanov's. I think, I don't think they would have shown up because that movement put pressure on trainers who were very comfortable just making the dog do it because I said so. That put pressure on the whole industry to learn. I am a better trainer because there were people who put away their choke chains, put away their prong collars, and said, I'm going to figure out how to do this with just a bait bag and some food or the dog's favorite toy. And while I was earning money doing it the old way, they were struggling and scratching their head and taking notes and going through frustration and collecting data and studying behavior from a scientific point of view and coming up with these ways to train dogs that have made my life easier, have made my clients' lives easier, and has brought fun back into it for our clients. And so I guess I got to go with him. Ian Dunbar's got to be the last one. But like, if I could, I'd want to see Martin Dealey on there. I'd want to see Mark Goldberg on there. I want to see Ivan, Bart, Michael on there. I mean, there are a lot of people who have just influenced me so much that are. Yeah. I mean, a lot of those, Michael, Bart, and Ivan, they have all the respect and accolades they need. Like they are well known, they're established, and that's great. But I never felt like Martin got the amount of recognition as a trainer that he deserved. I never believed that. Yeah. Like I wished he would have been more recognized. Mark Goldberg, again, when it comes to just the art of training pet dogs. I don't need my dog to do anything fancy, and I'm not going to get into the whole standards thing. But if you want to pick one person to say, my dog is not the family pet I want him to be, and I want to improve that relationship, Mark Goldberg is going to be the first at the top. As far as I know, he's the top of that list. And I hope to be up there with him someday. I hope to be able to be on his level someday. But he's really good, and he doesn't really have, because right now precision is the big thing. Everybody's wanting to be more precise. Everybody's looking for that flashy obedience. Thanks to people like Bart and Ivan and Michael, and I think that's all for the better, right?
Yeah.
I'm not discounting that, but that's not what Mark's offering. So nobody's really paying attention to what he's got going on right now, and that's a shame, because if you just want to help somebody get along with their dog better, he's got skills and tools that will really, really help out a lot. So there's that. There's a lot of people that belong in there. Casey Cover, huge influence on my work. But again, her influence has been somewhat subdued in the industry. Like, there's a lot of people. I guess these are people that there's a lot of people that should be more influential than they are.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Tekla Walton. Oh my God, that woman is amazing, and nobody really is paying attention, and I don't know why, but she's incredible. Like, every time I watch her work, I'm just like, oh my God, this is amazing. She's super dedicated. So, but I guess for my Mount Rushmore would have to be Keeler, Pavlov, Lorenz, and Dunbar.
It's good.
And I'm avoiding Skinner deliberately.
I was waiting. Yeah,
I'm avoiding.
But that's fair too. It's fair enough.
But it's. I think in some ways Skinner did as much harm as he did good. Is my problem.
Sure.
I think. I understand where behaviorism, and so when I say behaviorism, like, people call themselves behaviorists a lot. When I say behaviorism, I mean the subset of behavior studies called behaviorism. There's ethology, there's behaviorism, there's neurobiology, there's psychology, there's all sorts of disciplines that study behavior. Behaviorism is one of those studies. So people who call themselves behaviorists in theory, should be people who belong to that school of thought. And there are a couple of tenets of that school of thought that I find to be detrimental and problematic. One being that thought doesn't influence behavior, but thought is a behavior. I think thought definitely influences behavior. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to say it doesn't. And I understand the idea. If you just said, listen, we can't ever know what they're thinking, so we have to behave as if we have to behave without considering thought, I could understand that. But to say it just doesn't matter, that's just ridiculous. And the other thing that I think is even more problematic is the idea that learning is an event, not a process. I think that's a very destructive idea, because it might take me 100 reps for it all to go, oh, I get it. But that doesn't mean, just because there's that one aha moment doesn't mean he wasn't learning beforehand. It just meant it wasn't learning enough for it to translate to behavior. And that's the other thing too, is learning does not necessarily amount to a change of behavior. Right? Like if you tell me, hey, Chad, give me $100, I might understand exactly what you meant. And if you go, and I need it because of this, and you explain to me you're in this club and this, I understand. I've learned the rules of your club and why you need that $100. Obedience is not necessarily the same thing as understanding. So the animal may understand exactly what we want. He may have learned it, but he's not doing it reliably. And that's a different thing. And I don't like conflating learning and compliance as the same thing. I think that makes it trickier. Not to say Skinner didn't do anything to benefit us. He did a lot to benefit us. But I feel like there's trainers today that are still cleaning up his mess. You know, like some of the things.
Is it?
Go ahead.
Is it his mess, or do you feel that it might be our interpretation of what he was doing?
So I will say this in effective neuroscience, early on in the book, I think maybe in the introduction, I'm not sure, Panksepp talks about a letter he sent to well, I'm going to finish that, but let me go back. One of my favorite quotes from Skinner is cognitivism was starting to replace behaviorism in human psychology. Skinner found himself fighting against it a great deal, which is problematic too, because cognitivism is especially for humans, is a better way to approach learning. And since Skinner's time, that's been demonstrated over and over again. But he wrote an article, and in it, he had this quote. He says, "When a man says, 'I feel like going for a walk,' what he probably means is, 'I feel as I have felt before going for walks in the past.'" So it's hard to misinterpret that as being anything other than he actually isn't compelled to walk, except by the fact that he has a feeling that he previously had. In other words, walking is a learned behavior, that no man ever has a desire to walk just because he feels like walking, right? That's so. And then Panksepp wrote him a letter basically saying, can you get behind what we're doing? Because they're trying to figure out what happens inside these animals, and apparently Skinner was kind of trash talking that idea a little bit, or condemning that idea a little bit, saying it's unnecessary or whatever. And Panksepp wrote him a letter and said, could you, please, stop that, get behind this, and because we could use a man. I don't remember the exact nature of the letter, but Skinner's response was basically, something happens between the stimulus and the behavior, but that's someone else's job to figure out. I'm not interested in that. Right? So something along those lines. That's a paraphrase. I don't have it in front of me. It's probably a bad misquote, but that was the gist of it. And
okay.
And so that's where I go. Like I said, we can do things now. We can look at brain scans. We can see what parts of the brain are firing. We can put they put the little electrodes in the monkeys, or the little probes in the monkeys' brains, and they can tell when the dopamine is going off. Skinner didn't have any of that. So the mind was a black box.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very reasonable for him to say, you know what, we can't see what's going on in there, so we have to not take it into account. That's a reasonable position. I don't have any problem with that. But then the next step of saying, therefore, these things don't matter, There's a whole
Yeah.
process going. That's like saying when I stick my key in the ignition of my car and it starts, it doesn't matter what happens between the key and the battery. Well, yeah, as long as it works, that's fine. But if it doesn't work, knowing what's going on between the key and the battery and the starter and all and everything else, understanding how that works, that's how I fix it. Right? So once we get access to the black box, we need to care about it. And there's still, like, Skinner is one of the main reasons why, until about 6 years ago, if you would say, oh, my dogs love me, behaviorists would kind of pat you on the head and go, oh, that's sweet that you think your dog loves you. Let me explain. It's an evolutionary adaptation because humans like that behavior. So we have artificial selected for dogs who perform behaviors that we equate with love, but it's not really love. It's an evolutionary trick. Right? Then they throw a dog in an fMRI and they show him his family, and the same parts of his brain light up when he sees his family as parts of my brain light up when I see people I love. And now they have to go, okay, yeah, they do have emotions. And yeah, that matters. Yeah. But it's grudging. And not one of those people who mocked me for saying my dog loves me has ever apologized and said, you know what, I was wrong, you're right. Not once. Not one time. Yeah. So I'm a little bitter about that. Like they made fun. Like they would talk down to you, they belittle you, and that. So that's a little. I'm a little like I still hold a grudge, not because they were wrong, because they were so shitty about being wrong. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so here's my question, and
cool.
I like your question too, but here's my question. Actually, no, I got two more questions, so we're going to go a little bit longer.
All right, cool.
Okay.
I'm good, man.
Yeah. So the first question is, what would you say, if a trainer wants to start doing group classes, what would you say the most important thing is? What should they do? How should they approach setting up that curriculum? What would be your advice to them?
Okay. So I'm actually in the middle of writing ideally a course in regards to it. So I'm not sure when that's going to be out, when that's going to happen. But I think the easiest answer to that, mate, would be get a location, understand what you want to teach and how you want to teach things. So what techniques you want to use, what structure you want to put around the class. So do all of that initial basic work before you start to run a class. I think that's important. We've had people start classes in and around the area where we are, and they just haven't taken off because they haven't been clear on what they want. So I think be clear in the techniques you want to use, be clear, and it can be fluid, like you can change them at some stage. We're not teaching things the same way now that we were, 10, 12 years ago, let alone 2 years ago. Like we're always, to go back to your question earlier about, learning and that sort of thing, one of the things that we do is we constantly learn. And when we go to seminars and workshops like yours or Jay's or Tyler's or Forrest or whoever it might be, or we see Michael Ellis do stuff or whatever it is, or local trainers, we've got amazing local trainers, So when we see these kind of guys doing things, the first question is, will that work in a group class, yes or no? And can we teach that to our clients, yes or no? So when you're setting your group class up, if you want to be running a group class, those are the things that I'd be asking, myself, of what techniques do I want to use? How do I want to teach it? Where can I teach it? And then from there, I think a lot of the other things will fall into place. It comes down to, building relationships with the people who are coming down. If you need other handlers or other trainers, building relationships with them where you're comfortable spending 2 hours on a Sunday morning with them or whenever it is that you're going to train. But get a good foundation and understanding and be clear in what you want to be teaching first. I think that's probably important.
Okay, awesome. So here's going to be my new question. I'm going to start asking all my guests, unless it turns out to be a disaster, then I'll stop. But if you could give every dog owner and dog trainer in the world one piece of knowledge, one thing, what would it be?
To love your dog, mate. We, you met our boy Zuka, our big Rottweiler. So we just lost him 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Which is...
Oh, I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry.
Obviously, that's pretty... Thanks, dude. So obviously that's, kind of in our minds and in our hearts and our thoughts at the moment. So one of the things for us that I think we're quite good at is dealing with the grief that's around those sorts of things. And the reason we do deal with it okay is I believe that I've given Zuka or our other dogs that we've also lost, I think we've given them everything possible that we can. And that goes from, mental stimulation to physical, exercise and a shelter and food and everything that we can physically do to give them the best life that's possible. But to us, it just starts with love, mate. Like, if people love their dogs as much as they possibly can, and learn how to love their dog, ideally, then that would see less dogs in shelters and less dogs being rehomed and less dogs euthanized for shitty little behaviors. And so I think just start with being, with loving your dog and knowing that they're not perfect the same way that we're not perfect, and they have quirks the same ways that we have quirks. I think learn how to love your dog. I think let's start there, and hopefully that creates a little bit of harmony and happiness.
I like it. That's a good one. All right, man.
That'll be it.
What do you? I don't guess you guys. If somebody in Sydney or Melbourne wants to get in touch with you guys, get their dog trained, how would they go about doing that?
So there's a couple of ways. So definitely Facebook. So we have a business called the Canine Company.
And there's the letter K number 9. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you'd like to come along to our group classes, it's very, very easy. You just turn up. You don't have to book in. We just need to see your dog's current vaccination certificate, so bring that down with you. Our group classes are $25 per lesson and pay as you go, and you can jump on the website or jump on Facebook and you can see all those different locations, so just rock up. We're also travelling around a little bit at the moment. We've been in Hobart in Tasmania. A month and a half ago, we went down to an obedience club down there. We got invited down there to show them how we're running our successful obedience club. So we actually got awarded Australia's best dog trainers 2 years in a row, which was really, really nice.
Awesome. Congratulations.
To have an obedience class. Thanks, Matt. To have an obedience club like ours or a business like ours get an award like that was very, very satisfying. So that was cool. So we're enjoying traveling around a bit and helping out clubs in regards to how they're running obedience clubs, fine-tuning techniques or, helping with the culture of their club, helping with the trainers, helping with their business setup. So all of those sorts of things we're doing at the moment, which is a lot of fun. So if you'd like to get in contact with us, the Canine Company is definitely the way to do it via Facebook, or we've obviously got a website as well. So that's cool. If you'd like to follow anything I'm doing on the Instagram is Brent Dry Dog Trainer, so BRENTDRY Dog Trainer. Jump on Instagram and follow us there. Otherwise, everything else goes up on the Canine Company Facebook page or Instagram page as well.
Sweet. Do you have a YouTube channel?
We do, yeah. So the Canine Company, it's not crazy active. There is a bunch of really cool stuff on there, but we're actually picking up a new puppy tomorrow night, our time. So hopefully we'll be shooting a fair bit more footage and hanging out with him. He's a new little Rottweiler puppy that we've got. His name's Mr. Smith. So Mr. Smith will be making his debut with us Monday night, which we're really looking forward to. We're driving up about 5 or 6 hours or something to pick him up tomorrow. So we're really looking forward to that, and that'll provide us a little bit of fun and some more training opportunities, some more video opportunities, but more so just to we don't have a Rottweiler in the house at the moment. It's the first time forever, so it'd be nice to have a Rottweiler back in the house to go along with naughty little puppy, my Malinois. Yeah. So let's go for that.
Sweet. So do you think you'll be going out and doing some more traveling and showing people what you guys are doing in the group class? Because it sounds like it's definitely worth checking out.
We are. Ideally, we are. We've got another one down in Tasmania that we're looking at doing in the next month or so. They've just running it past their committee, which is good. I'm off to Adelaide later in the year as well to do another one. So we're definitely open to travel. We enjoy traveling, and if someone would like us to come out, then we're super open and happy to do that. Whether it's a seminar. So kind of the way that we're working it, which works well, is we do a seminar for all of the instructors. And then if we're there, for instance, on a weekend when you have your group classes, we observe the group classes and then we can give feedback and help and that sort of thing in regards to that. So, giving our professional advice and something that obviously I'm very passionate about the obedience side of it. My wife, Kat, is very passionate about the relationship side of it and building the culture and the team and that sort of thing. So as a couple, it works really well. We've both got both very, very invested in what we do, and we both have different passions and different styles. But as an overall group, it definitely helps out. So it's a nice way to do it.
Well, there you have it, guys. If Brent and Kat are great people and there's really solid trainers, and it sounds like they're doing really good work down there. So if you're interested in booking them for a workshop, I'm sure you can contact them through their website or whatever. I hope that that's going to be a very successful venture for you, because I think more people need to be teaching group class workshops. I mean, I've got mine, and somebody else just came out with one pretty recently that I saw. I can't remember who it was, but I think it's time for good group classes to come back in style, and I think there's a few people who are doing it right. It sounds like you're one of them. So if people want to contact you about that, I'm gonna push my recommendation. People should definitely get you out for that. You and Kat both, because you're both great people. And I guess that's it, man. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. It's good to see your face again. Are you going to be at conference this year or what?
Yeah, hoping to be at conference, mate. It's down in Florida again, isn't it? So we'd like to get there and have a couple of beers, but down at the Tiki Bar, and we missed last year, which was a bit of a shame, but we'd love to be there this year, and maybe we can come over a little bit earlier and run a couple of workshops for people over there. That'd be ideal. And we miss the IACP family, man. Like, you guys are a special part of our life, and we've truly made lifelong friends at the IACP conference, and we care about you guys deeply. We talk about a lot of the friends that we've made and family that we've had at the IACP conferences where we've met you socially, or you guys have come out here. There's a lot of you guys that we truly appreciate seeing, man. So if we can get back in and amongst it and be there at the conference, and that'll be amazing. We'd love to do it. There's some great speakers this year. The lineup's just come out. There's a few Australians who are talking, so that's awesome. But yeah, we'd love to get back over again this year.
Well, I hope I see you there. But again, thank you for sitting down with me. It's been great catching up with you, and we'll keep in touch. All right.
Yeah, always, Chad. Really appreciate it, mate. It's been a blast being on, man. Thank you. It's a nice thing to come on and be invited on these sorts of things, to sit down with a mate and just talk about what we both care deeply about, man. So I appreciate it, and thanks to the people who are still listening a couple of hours later on. So I appreciate it.
And we'll do it again. I enjoyed this a lot. So.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
I've got a bunch of other things that I want to bounce around too. So yeah, I'd love to come on again.
Sweet. All right, everybody. That's it. We're out of here. Have fun with your dogs, and as Brent would say, go love your dogs. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.